Yeah, I will just do a short introduction for those who haven't met me before. Then I will discuss or show you what invoices are, just a quick overview. Then I will go into verify what is nice to know inside there, how to collaborate between verify and optimize, and then go some more into optimization. I will go through every single feature that is in optimize and how you what you should do, and after that we have some Q&As. And of course, you are, as Jesper told, welcome to raise your hand or just speak up if you have some questions. Myself, working as an external consultant for Corp, I've been doing that for 15 years now. Had a lot of experience with Kofax invoices, and I think most of you have also spoken with me in some support sessions or stuff like that. And we have had a long-term relationship with Lego for all 15 years. Been working with Hanne and a lot of other different people. Good. Readsoft. It's actually it contains of a lot of different modules. You have probably mostly worked with the verify module or optimize module, but it's actually 6 different products, but they are all working closely together. The first module, which is the manager module, it's an administrative tool where we set up Readsoft. We decide which field you would like to capture on an invoice. We set up how you get invoices into your system and how you get them out again. We also do the maintenance jobs where we clean up your definitions, those that are not in good shape and is actually doing more damage to a system. And we also do the import of master data, stuff like that. And then we have what we call the productive line or production line. That is where the workflow or the process workflow is in terms of your invoices, where we have in the old days the scan module. Now we are more we see invoices coming in through email or XML files, but still they've been more or less feeded into the system just before the interpret module. The interpret module is an automated tool that is running on the server. It's running in the background, so you never see it, but it's actually where all the magic happens. What is happening there is that we try to identify who is sending you an invoice, and after that we try and extract all the information and validate it. And based on the validation, we categorize the document as one with errors or a document without errors. If it contains errors, it will be redirected into the verify module, where you come in and verify all the different values and change something if needed. And then afterward, of course, approve it like you are used to. Once you approve it, it goes back to the automated process. And in this case, it is the transfer module. And in transfer module, we more or less collect all the different images again and put them into one PDF file and send it into your SAP system together with the metadata that you just captured. Once your SAP system has accepted the document, we release it, and then it's being deleted from Readsoft and no longer exists inside this document process flow. Yeah, just one comment for this all these different modules. It is a closed environment, so there's no way that document can just disappear out of the blue. It is either because there are some special settings in the filter that we set up that doesn't allow you to see a document, maybe because it is in one profile but in an incorrect company code, for instance. That combination can cause that a document can disappear, but it will always be visible from within the manager module that only some of you have access to. So have that in mind. Once an invoice comes into your mailbox, it is, if it's being processed correctly and it's inside Readsoft, it is not going to disappear unless you delete it or we transfer it into your SAP system. We can always find it. Good. Now the verify module, you probably all worked with it before. So you know more or less all the different features that is in there, but still there are some new there are some useful features that I really would like you to remember and use it on a daily basis. And before we go to that, during this upgrade, we have introduced some new things. One is the new inboxes. As you can see, we have divided it into some region that is more suitable for your daily work. And Petra has been a great help in doing this. But still, all the different company codes are there, but in different folders, and make it a bit more simple. That means if you do collect both PDF file and XML file for one company code, they will be in the same inbox. Only those XML files that need some special attention will be placed into this XML need action. And also duplicates will be located in the duplicate folder, and it contains duplicate for all of the above company codes. Then we have introduced a new reroute plugin. It's a custom development that we have made. And the reason for that is you do have a lot of different profiles in your system. Profile is, in some cases, they are relative to the company code you are verifying or paying invoices for. And it's very important that when you reroute and select a buyer, that you find the correct profile. And that can be, that's not an easy task because a lot of the company codes are belonging to a Danish profile. And so what we have done now is simplified. So you only need to select the buyer number and we will automatically reroute it into the correct profile. In the screenshot that you see here is actually already outdated because there's also a feature called, what's it called? I think it's called message, where you can put in a reason why are you redirecting this invoice. And when you put in this message, whenever someone opens it at the other end, this message will pop up and your explanation will be visible to them. So it's actually a quite nice feature to have. Good. Then we have all the standard functionalities. Well, first of all, in the upper right hand, the upper right corner in your verify module, you have this supplier dialog where you as a verifier should go in and accept or acknowledge whatever the system has found itself. If there's a mismatch in the supplier name, you have this search bar. Maybe I can show it in a live environment. Here we have it. That's an XML. This one. As you can see, this search bar here is a free text search bar, and it can search through all the different columns that you see below. We have, in my case, name one, supplier number, and VAT registration number. So whenever you type something, it keeps searching in the database, and the list gets smaller and smaller the more you type. And if you need additional search field, you can always click on this small gear icon, and then you can see if you know how to, for instance, the telephone number. If you click that one, you can also search for the telephone number in this small dialog box. If that isn't sufficient, you can always click on the supplier link, and then a pop-up appears where all the predefined information is filled out. You can clear the selection, and then you can just search for any of the field, or put in a filter on any of the field, and you can also sort on the different values by clicking on the headlines. Whenever you find the supplier you would like to select, you just double click on it or click it once, and then OK, then it's being moved to this field here. The first time an invoice appears in verify from a certain supplier, if it's the first time, it will always be yellow, a yellow exclamation mark, and that's all right. You just need to accept whatever it found, so it knows for sure that the next time it gets it correct. Then we have the reject and delete functionality. I recommend that you always delete a document if you know for sure you're not going to pay it. There's no need to just reject it. And the reason for that is if something goes wrong in your network, your SAP system is down, or for some reason for a period of time it doesn't accept invoices, Readsoft will get a rejection. And if you also manually reject invoices, then we end up having a lot of invoices being resent into your SAP system that shouldn't have been sent in the first place. So that's why I suggest that delete the invoices if you're not going to pay them. It's up to you if you would like to put in a user remark why you are rejecting or deleting a document. We use it just to, if we are missing an invoice for some reason, we can go in and see why did someone delete it. Was it intentionally, or was it an accident, or what is it? So before you delete the document, you can go to this invoice menu, go down to user remark, and then a small dialog pops up where you can type in the information and then delete it. Then we have save to optimize. Save to optimize is probably the most important feature, of course, beside approving invoices. Save to optimize is a feature that you use if you discover that an invoice, for instance, is connected to the wrong supplier, meaning that whenever you open up an invoice, on the front page it says maybe it's from EMEA, but when you open it up, you can see it's from Maersk Line. That's an incorrect connected supplier. You also use it if you see an invoice not being captured correctly. A lot of fields are not correct, or it has a lot of suggestions. Then it also makes sense to use the optimize. Also, if the verify operator and the optimize operator are not the same person, if that's not the case, you can more or less compare saving to optimize as if you go to a table and deliver a stack of invoices with a lot of post-it notes on it, where you can type, please look at the invoice number on this invoice and the amount on this invoice and stuff like that. That is also something Save to Optimize can do. And then, of course, if you're not optimizing on the fly, you can more or less put this stack of invoices aside, and then take it up once you have the time, and then look at the different node that you put to the optimization you would like to do. And then lastly, if you have old definitions, what optimize also does is send a new copy of the received invoice into optimize. Whenever you create definitions, it just saves the first image that it received. So if it is a few years old, then you might optimize on something incorrect. But I will show that later on. Also keep in mind that when you do optimization, it might be everything is working perfectly for a period of time, but suddenly something stops working, and you can often see that if you know for sure that this company is always having a complete status complete in the end received invoices, but suddenly you begin to see this field proposal. That is most probably because they have changed the layout, or for some reason the definition gets corrupted, or something like that. And that is when you should try and save it to optimize and go in and see what's actually happened. And when you do save to optimize, what happens is that you get this small pop-up where you can fill in information. Why are you sending this document to optimize? We have a possibility to pre-fill some values that you can select from, and you can also just replace some of the wording with so it fits your needs. But you can always use this the lowest box for free typing. After you have clicked OK, you are actually you can continue verifying the invoice if you like. You can also stop and go directly to optimize. But once you have filled this one out, you have already sent it to optimize, and someone can look at it, or yourself later. And if you just jump to optimize, what happens when you look at the optimize module, you can see this supplier that I just sent have a value of 99 in the optimize field. And when you open this definition, the same message that you just wrote pops up. So you can see exactly what it is you would like to have optimized. Another thing, I mentioned that the first time you create a definition, you more or less get a copy of the invoice paper that we used to optimize, so to create the first definition with. And whenever you send an invoice to optimize, you can see you get a new, what we call learning invoice together with it. Your job is then to click on the newest available date in this list. And if it's not visible, this invoice or learning invoice, you go to view and optimize and make sure that learning invoices is enabled. That is a custom setting on your own PC that you need to do. And one of the reasons why I'm mentioning this, that you need to send it to optimize if it's an old one. I have a good case here where this definition was created back in 2017, and those that are verifying keep saying that we cannot find anything on this invoice, no matter how we do. And the person optimizing is saying that, well, I have optimized everything. It looks perfectly correct. But the problem is when they save it to optimize, before I taught them how to save to optimize, they didn't do it. So from 2017 to 2021, you can actually see that the layout changes a lot. So no matter how much they optimize on the old layout, it's not the same on the new one. So for instance, the invoice number should be up here, but on the old layout, there's nothing. So it's very important that you do save to optimize now and then.
Peter, may I ask you a question? Is there any issue with leaving old invoices aside, like leaving them there, or should we delete them, those which are not as a learning invoice?
I think you should go and delete them. And if you're not doing it, then our maintenance job will do it. Okay. Because it does save some old specifications. Mm-hmm. Yeah, also specifications, and it can sometimes cause some issues I've seen. So normally, I said, it doesn't matter if you have old pictures lying, but I think
keep it safe, better delete it.
Yeah, exactly. Just something I recently discovered. So go ahead and delete it once you have marked the new one. Then we have another feature called variance. Variance is actually very simply, it's how you create an additional invoice definition for a supplier. Normally, we always say that there's one supplier, one definition, but you can't create variance. And you create variance if you have different layout from a customer. It could be an invoice credit, a credit note and an invoice. Could be two different layouts. Could also be in this case where I have an example with two. We have one customer, the same account. One of them is in a town called Hvidovre, and the other one is from Greve. And whenever we receive invoices from Hvidovre, we know that the order number would be in the upper right corner. But when Greve sends it, we just get a date instead. And in these cases, there's nothing we can do other than have a lot of validation errors each time one of them gets there. So in order for the system to automatically detect everything correctly, we need to create a variant for man truck. And the way you do that is in verify. Just show you. Open this one again. You have this description field. That's the easiest way to create a variant. If you go in and just type the name of the new variant that you would like to create, there will always be one blank. That's default, blank, sorry. It's default definition, but you can go in and type a name for your second variant. And when you press enter, it pops up saying that now it will create an invoice definition and you need to be accurate as possible. What happens is that it resets all the field that you have created and simply make all field visible, and it doesn't know much about where the different things are. Your job is then to mark the different areas on the invoice. It's not enough just to type it in manually because it doesn't learn anything about where the information is in the invoice paper. So bear in mind that you draw these squares around the values. And then just go in and approve the invoice. I know there's probably a lot of field that you don't need, but still just make sure everything is green, and then you can go in afterward in optimize and remove fields that is not needed. You can find the definition in optimize where it has this description that you just typed in. And as I mentioned, there's one blank and there's your second. You're welcome to go in and rename the blank one if you need to. When it comes to verify, there will always only be one supplier, even though you have a lot of different variants. The second you select a supplier with variants, it pops up with this additional screen here where you can select the layout that you want to use. But hopefully you shouldn't see this one because the main goal is, of course, to have the system automatically detect which one of the variants to use. And that's where it gets a bit tricky because most of the suppliers have the same layout of their invoices. So they have the same logo. And the way Readsoft works is that it actually just looks for the logo. And whenever it find the logo, it is sufficient recognition to select the supplier. So what you need to do is use what we call one of the value identifiers. We have, under normal circumstances, two identifiers. We have a logo That's a graphical element that we look for. And then we have what we call the value identifier. The logo can only see black and white dots, more or less. It doesn't read what is on the identifier, whereas the value identifier, it can understand, it can read, interpret whatever is selected. And for this case, I have selected here, we have an invoice written in German. We have one in English. So whenever they received it in German, it couldn't understand a single word and couldn't find any fields. So we decided to create a German variant where we told that one of the value identifiers, it doesn't matter which one, or if it's called telephone number in this case, we just told it that select or expect an 8-character value identifier for the German one and only 7 for the English version. And since I just mentioned that we only look for the logo, we need to go in, if we click on the settings bar and go to the identification, we need to make sure that this OR is not selected, but the AND is instead. Default OR is the selected one, so that also means it looks for the logo or it looks for the telephone number. We want to look for both the logo and the telephone number on both of the invoice definitions. Then the system will automatically select the correct variant. Then lastly, we have the process log. I think it's also good to know of. In the process log, you can see everything about the document. You can, in Verify, you have it for a single document, and in the manager module, you can see it for all documents that have been through the system, as long as we, of course, keep the process log. But you can go in and see when the document was interpreted. That means when did we pick it up from the mailbox. You can see the date of the mail. You can see the subject, who was it sent from and to, and what is the attachment name. And these informations are good to know if you need to find it again and resend it, or if you need to reject or send something back to customer saying that we cannot pay it, or stuff like that. And then, of course, we have some shortcuts. They're good to know. I never used them, but you who is verifying a lot, yeah, you will get this PowerPoint afterwards. So if you want to have them memorized, then feel free. Are there any questions to the Verify module? Nope. Then I will go in.
I have a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
I remember that in the last model, it was not possible to optimize any credit notes. As I understand, it will be able with this new model.
Was it in relate to XML files or just normal PDF?
Normal PDF.
Normal PDF, yeah. In a few minutes, I will go through all the different fields, and credit note will be one of them as well. So I will answer that in a short while.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Good. Now the optimize module. Before I go into it, I would just shortly mention that I'm talking about what we call an invoice profile and an invoice definition. An invoice profile is the master template that Readsoft uses, or it's kind of a guide where it tells Readsoft exactly how to read. Sorry. The invoice profile is where we set up what field you would like to capture. And we also set up a very wide explanation on how, for instance, an invoice number looks like. We don't want an invoice number just to be numbers between 2 and 5 digits, for instance. So in order for the system to read more or less everything from all suppliers, we accept more or less everything. So it can also accidentally maybe select a date instead of an invoice number. It is as correct as an invoice number because we do capture more or less everything. When you create a definition the first time, we just copy everything, all settings and everything from your profile into a definition. And when you are optimizing in Optimize, what you optimize here is the definition that is more or less a one-to-one with the supplier. And also go in and refine and make sure that the system knows exactly how to capture everything from a certain supplier. And I think I will go into your live environment now. Okay, so maybe I just jumped in too fast. When you open Optimize, you just get under normal, you just get a blank gray screen here. Then you have the possibility to go in and select your the company, the profile you would like to optimize something from. It just fills out this profile that you clicked on. You can always remove it. Again, all the fields that you see on top are search field. You can narrow down your list to find the exact definition you would like to optimize. All the different fields is, well, you have the profile, invoice profile here, supplier number, the supplier name, everything here comes from your SAP system. Then we have the description field. The description field was the variant that you just created. Most of them will be blank. If you sort it, you can see there are some. You do have some variants created already. Then we have the optimize field. As I mentioned, whenever you save an invoice definition to optimize, they will be marked with the status 99. And what you can do is go in and just type 99, and all of them will be not selected. They will be shown. And if you are a person that is doing a lot of optimization, it's a good way to start optimizing, because this is someone from your organization that needs help optimizing these ones. And as I mentioned, there's a good explanation why it's there. So you don't have to just guess what they would like to have optimized. If nobody types in anything, you just have to optimize everything and hope for that you actually fix whatever the issue was. So you as a verify operator, please type in something when you save to optimize, so it's easier to understand here. Then we have the total column. That is how many times the invoice definition has been used since it was optimized. It gets reset every time you optimize it. All-time total, it never gets reset. It's how many times you have used it since it was created. Ident rate tells you how well the system identifies the supplier, and the number needs to be as high as possible, where 100 is the highest. Fully interpreted, that is a field that we increase every time we see an invoice needs attention. And by attention we mean if you need to fill out more than, I think it's 60 or 80%. It's a number we can manually set. It's either 60 or 80%. If you need to fill in more info, those 80% of the field, then we will definitely go in and mark it as a poorly interpreted definition. And if you're not doing anything with it, then we will delete it in a maintenance job, because we really hope that the system can find more than 20% of the field itself. And the reason why 60% should be more than sufficient, I would say it should find half of the information itself. But it could be that they change the layout completely on the invoices, and then this poorly interpreted will start climbing. Then we have interpret. That means interpret identified the supplier and it has been the right one. So that's a good sign. It should be as high as possible compared to the total. Ident and verify means that at first it didn't find the correct supplier, but you have changed it into this supplier definition. It doesn't say that much of the supplier definition you are on, but on another one that was actually causing the issue, which is the next field, incorrect ident. These are the really bad ones for the system. What it means is that, I just move 99. What it means is that in this case, nearly 7,000 times did the interpret select the supplier, but you selected a different supplier inside verify. So 7,000 times the system used a lot of time to interpret using an incorrect supplier definition, and you use time changing it in verify and type in all the information manually if it couldn't find anything after you change the supplier. So if you're not going to optimize these ones, and of course you need to compare the amount of incorrect compared to the total. If it's similar more or less, then maybe there's a reason why it's so high. It could be that it's the same layout for travel expense or something like that, where you cannot differentiate between maybe some employees or stuff like that. But definitely delete it or go in and see if you can correct it, because it is causing a lot of noise in the system. Then we have status. It's just, we have three official statuses. We have unknown, known, and learned. Unknown is an auto-generated definition. We shouldn't take much care of these because they get created by themselves if you delete them, or under normal circumstances we delete them every 14th day if there are some unknowns. Known means that the system is aware of who the supplier is based on the logos or the value identifier. And then we have learned. Those invoices are it's a definition where you have learned more or less all the field in optimize. So you have used a lot of time on them. So we treat them differently when we run the maintenance job. As I said, the unknown will be deleted after 14 days. Known will probably be deleted after a year if we haven't used it for a year. And by using it, I mean you haven't received any invoices from a certain supplier for more than a year. And learned might survive for 2 years. It depends. I can't remember actually. But let me look. Oh, 13 days for the unknown and 1 year for both learned and unknown definitions. Good. And then we have the auto approve. Auto approve means the definition has been set to auto approve the invoice if everything is complete or marked as complete. Then it's being sent directly from your mailbox through interpret directly into SAP. So you won't see it in verify unless there's a validation error. And you can sort them out again and see how many you have. And you can also see it based on a company code, for instance. You can see what is relevant for you, how many auto-approved do I have. You can also go in, if for instance type no, then you only have these invoice definitions, and then you can sort out which one do you receive most invoices from, and maybe look at, would that be an idea to optimize that one and make sure it runs through the system automatically. Yeah, then we have some other stuff. Who created it? When was it by? Who was it last used by? And when it was used and changed and stuff like that. Any questions to the statistics? Then I will open one. Okay, so when you open the definition, make sure you always have the last one selected up here. It's very important, as I mentioned. Then we have the supply overview, as you saw before. If you see there's actually an incorrect, the invoice doesn't to be the same as the supplier, you need to change the supplier or even just go out, delete it, then there's something wrong. You have the 3 different identifiers. Make sure you have a good, clear, and crisp image of the logo. Pay attention to that it didn't capture the invoice or factura or whatever is mentioned here. It's, as you can see, the logo looks very similar to something else. So sometimes we do see the system captures invoice as the logo, which is definitely not good, because then we do see a lot of incorrect ident because it suits more or less every invoice you receive. Value identifier is often used for the VAT number. You can also see it did capture it here. That is some rules that the system knows. It doesn't have to be the VAT number. You can always go in and select something else if that makes sense. Then we have the buyer. We don't use that. But if we did, what we use it for is if you have a lot of papers you put into a scanner and you don't sort out who the supplier, who the receiver is, then you can go in and mark the buyer area, and the system will try to identify the buyer that you have in your system and automatically send it to that inbox and verify. But since we have mailboxes that is a one-to-one with your buyers, we don't need this information. So you don't have to learn the system where it is. And then we come to credit and invoice. The credit and invoice field is a special field because it works that way. It searches for any information that indicates it's a credit note. If it cannot find anything, it will treat it as an invoice. So you always have to remember and go in and select where on the invoice is the invoice written, because most probably they will also put the credit note on that field as well. Does that explain your question, Eva?
Yes. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, good. There is sometimes where, for instance, in Denmark, we have a company called Nykredit, which is very similar to credit. We do have let me see if I can go there. We have this file called EI Global Extra. And in an EI Global Extra, there's a lot of business logic for this particular profile, language profile that we have. But we also have what we call exclude titles, and we can use exclude titles both for logos, so it doesn't capture invoice as a logo. But we also have it for instance, the invoice/credit note field, so it doesn't stumble across some field or some values that so it doesn't. In our case, if it finds new credit, it shouldn't select it as a credit note, but actually an invoice. So we can put in all these exclude titles on each of the field if we keep getting incorrect information, and that is the first time you receive invoices from that supplier, of course. Good. So make sure you select in the title field where it is on the invoice, so the system knows where to expect the credit note whenever it comes.
Peter, may I ask you?
Yes.
Can you select like anything, or does it have to be one of the predefined titles for credit note?
No, you can type anything. No, sorry. What did you say? Can you say? You are very far away. Can you say it again?
Yeah, like in the verify, if you have a credit note, can you select let's say any text to be a credit note? And if
You
it's
should
not
not-
there, it's an invoice. But
Yeah, you should not select anything in verify. That shouldn't be necessary. But of course you can do it, but you just need to select after. You only have these two options that is available in the drop-down list for the credit or invoice note field.
so what is in the title? Could you open the drop down?
In Optimize.
In Optimize, yeah. Yeah, so these are taken from the configuration file, right?
Right.
And hypothetically, can I select anything like from the invoice, which would be, let's say, using Danish profile, a Czech word for credit, because that is actually what is happening, or German word?
These that you see here are all the different words that we have put in for this field. And under normal circumstances, I never select any predefined fields. It's just whatever it searches for to identify a credit note. You should just make sure that you mark, no matter what is in the drop-down list, you just mark it on the invoice paper, and it will try and replicate it into these two fields.
Yeah. So let's say that there is some special word which is not including in any configuration file, but is marking a credit note that can be used to identify a credit note.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. Good. Then we have the invoice date. That is also a kind of a special field because dates are written in so many different ways. As a standard for US, we do put in dates in year, month, day, I believe it is, in verify. But you not always receive invoices that way. Often European invoices are with day, month, year. And the system will always try to represent the date and verify in your corporate way of doing it. So always a good idea to go in and mark the date on the invoice, and if it is not represented correct and verify, make sure you put it in the right word in verify. Just below the value that is represented when you mark a date is used to interpret how the supplier is typing their date. And in this case, even though it says 0505, they have probably received it around May. So it guesses that the first two digits are day, and the next two is representing the month, and the last four digits is representing the year. If it only said 5/5/21, you would have to put in only one D and one M and two Ys. If it says 5/5/21, that way the system knows exactly how to treat it and convert it into the corporate way of writing dates in verify and also sending it to SAP. if you have an invoice where they put in instead of month represented as digits, but they put in maybe 3-letter words, May, APR, or whatever, you need to make sure that you put in 3 M's. And whenever they are using dates in writing, it's very important that you go in this list box and select the language that the invoice is written in. And the reason for that is we have a conversion table that we look into. And whenever we see a date maybe written in French and says July, Julie, then we know that we have to convert it into the number 7. So whenever you have dates written in text, make sure you always select the correct language. I just need to find something. Here. As you can see here, we have, as I said, if you use 1D, that means the date are written between 1 to 31. If it's double D, they put in 01 instead of just 1. And the same for a month. 1 to 9, it's M, and 2 if it's 01 for the month. If it's 3, Jan, Feb, and so on, you put in 3 M's, and if it's the full month name they use, the maximum number of M's you should put in is 4. And if you have some problems with the dates and they put in colons or some other strange characters, in rare cases you can use this X. You can put in and use a square parentheses and use this dot that they are using. It's very rare that we use that one, but it's definitely possible. Good. Are there any questions for the dates? No. Good. It's also a good idea when you do have dates that you select a title. Often dates are at the top of the paper, so it's not that necessary, but in cases where maybe the layout changes a little bit, it's a good idea to have a title to search for. Then we come down to the invoice number. And as I mentioned, we have a very wide specification for the invoice number, so it suits more or less all the suppliers that we receive invoices from. And as you can see right now, we have marked what we call the format specification. A format specification is a rule that we set up, and Readsoft compares whatever it finds against this rule. And what it says here is that we can more or less accept all available characters as long as it's between 3 and 12 in length. So it can easily be the date, it can be this name, it can be one of one. Everything is actually correct because it's more than 3 characters and less than 12. And it can be anything. So your job is to go in and make sure that at least try to find out what do we expect from this supplier. And in this case, zoom in a bit, it looks like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 numbers. So you can go in and change this one to N10. And then you can also go down to this format that we have down here and say that I don't expect characters at all, or alpha, upper and lower cases, only numbers. And if you reinterpret this one, you can always do a check and see if it captures everything. Should you by accident select more than let's see if I can. Should you select more than this, and you press the OK button, it comes up with this validation error. And the reason for that is, as you can say, you marked more than these 10 numbers. So the error that you get here is also the error you would get in Optimize and Verify. If it's impossible for you to just only mark these 10 numbers, what you can do also is just put in a lot of asterisks or stars behind. What it means is that it deletes all unwanted character, 1 star for 1 character. And if you do reinterpretation afterward, you can see suddenly you only have the 10 numbers again. So that is a way to get rid of something that's keep. For instance, if they have an invoice number where they put in a PO number where they put in a -1, -2, you can easily remove this information if you don't want them, and is unable to only mark this area here. And the reason I also would like you to be more accurate in these specification is if you would like to auto approve this invoice, it's actually nice to know that dates don't suddenly begin capturing this one as a 1 and take the rest of the invoice number as well. You know for sure that this supplier only sends you 10-digit numbers, and if it doesn't find only a 10-digit number, it will stop. You can also, if you would like, go in and tell the system that maybe the first digit should be a 3, so you don't accidentally capture this one below. And you can do that by typing in N and then use the square parentheses. The square ones means that it can only be the number inside this one. It doesn't mean that you type in number 3. It only means that the first number needs to be a 3 in order for the system to validate it correctly. And since there's only one number you would like to check, you don't need to put it into parentheses with a 1, as I have with 9. So what it says here is that I expect one number. It can only be number 3, and then 9 other numbers. So that is how you can make sure that the system select only this one. Then again, put in a search title. Make sure that you mark the it actually found an incorrect name. So we put in the right one, Faktura number, and press the OK button. Then you have saved that information. Yeah, the same goes for the PO number. We are still at the top of an invoice. So again, we do expect it to be more or less at the same position. And the reason why I keep saying that is we have this position square here, where we have 4 options. The dot, that means we expect the field to be at this exact position every time. Whereas the up and down arrow means it can move up and down on the invoice. And we often see that with amounts. We never know for sure how many lines they put in. So this field will probably go up and down on this invoice layout. So we need to make sure that we have selected the up and down arrow in this case. And then it is crucial that you select a title that is meaningful for this exact amount that you would like to capture. And in this case, it's total, which is correct. So what happens here is that it starts searching for a title where it says total. And whenever it finds it, it goes out to the right. And it knows the distance it needs to travel based on your definition. So it goes out here and take the amount. You can also help it a little bit more by stating where the currency is. Is it before the amount? No, it's after. So check that one out. And if they have maybe 3 decimals, then put it in here. Often there's only 2. In some cases it's 0. If they use 0 decimal, oh, what happened? If they use 0 decimal, we often see that it actually reads the amount incorrect. So make sure that you look at this one as well, and it fits the whatever's on the invoice. And then we also have first page, last page. Normally, we search for amounts on the last page, even though it might be a 1-page invoice, but should they put in hundreds of lines, it will be the last page. And the only thing that it matters is how fast it interprets the invoice. It will eventually end up on the last page if you select first. But and of course, you can also select both, which doesn't make sense, but it's possible. But often we use last page, but probably you know more of the supplier that they only use these 3 lines, so it's always just the first page you find the invoice on, or the amount on. If you have some fields that you know for sure are never used for a certain supplier, I suggest that you go in and put it inactive. You can check. You can see if fields are inactive if they have this gray icon, and it simply means that the system doesn't capture any information to that field and it doesn't represent it and verify anymore. So if you have someone without a VAT rate and VAT amounts, then put them inactive. By default, we also have some field inactive, and it's possible to go in and make them active. But when you do that, you cannot just leave the field blank. You need to make sure that you can point it out on the paper. Otherwise, you are not allowed to approve the field. So that is something you need to do. Then we have currency. Currency is also a kind of a special field because it is what we call a supplier field. A supplier field is a field that the system remembers. So the first time you approve an invoice from a certain supplier, it knows what currency you selected at that point in time. And if you suddenly select a different currency, you get a warning saying that pay attention to the currency. Imagine you are paying in euros, but they send in an invoice in Chinese yen. It would be quite a huge amount to pay in euros. So it gives you that warning. If you have problems selecting or if you keep getting validation errors for currency because they're not putting it, not stating what it is, and you know for sure that your local grocery dealer always send invoices in US dollar, you can go in and set no interpretation to that field and type it in manually in the title. So whenever you do that, it will always remember, it will always write what it is you have put in here if you say no interpretation. It's kind of a small tweak, but use it with care because it doesn't interpret anything. It's a statement you put in. Are there any questions to what you have seen in Optimize right now? Good.
Nope. Thank you.
Nope. Then we have the settings. I mentioned shortly that we have this identification where often we only have the logo selected as the main identifier, and all of the other ones are it looks at them secondly. It's not high priority. But if you want definitions with variants to be select it, you need to make sure that it looks at both the logo, child ID, and char ID. And in this case here, where we have 3 different, of course, it gets more and more complicated for the system to select this one. And if you only have one invoice with the same logo and you forget to set this one will probably never get selected. It will just stop with the first one with the same logo. So if you do use it like this, you have to do it on all your variants. Then we have this one, invoice, at the bottom. If you discover that a certain invoice keeps getting into your system and gets completed, that means everything is green and verified, and you are brave enough, and then you can go in here and check this automatically approve invoices with complete status. And that means it goes directly into SAP system if everything is correct. But please do make sure that you have gone through all the different fields, make sure you have narrowed down the specifications so it is validated correct against the information from the certain supplier. Now, I mentioned a lot of different specification, and these are actually quite important. I did mention we have N. N represents all numeric character. A is the alphabetic, and we do treat lower and uppercase characters differently, but it still represents both the A. Then we have X, can be anything, and special characters, underscores, hyphen, all the different signs that you see here. If you want to force a white space, if it's maybe the space is too small so it doesn't recognize it, you can force a white space into the captured value as well. Could be between a username, maybe an approve or something like that. The asterisk, it removes one unwanted character. You can also move unwanted characters between. If you have a INV dash and a number, you can remove the dash if you want. Then we have some decimal. That is not something you're going to use. Sometimes we are not treating amounts as a numeric field, but a normal field, then you can go in and use this one. So, but we are not using that in your system. Then you can disallow characters. And I have examples for this one. Let's say N10 with a normal parentheses means it can only be a 10-digit number. If it's not, we get a warning of validation error in verify. 3 to 10 means it can be anything between 10 and 10 3 and 10 digits. If you use the square parentheses N139, it can only be one number, and it could be one of these. And if we jump down to this one, where we say, again, square 139 and a normal parentheses with 3, it can be any combination of these three numbers. And then we have the power sign, where it cannot be 1 or 0. So it can only be 2, 3, and so on. Very easy to remember. And then, of course, you can combine all the different specifications. As I mentioned, if you have an invoice number saying INV 1234, you can put in a specification where you say A3 and N4 would be sufficient in this case. But if it should fit all these different scenarios, then you have to say 4 to 6. So it also accepts both 4, 5, and 6 digits. If you would like to remove the A from this value here, you can put in the asterisk and say it's an N3 asterisk, N5, then it's been interpreted as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. And if they use a special character that you would like to capture, but it's not always. Sometimes they use A or a digit, then you just put in the X. It accepts everything. And then we also have these parentheses that I cannot pronounce. What you can use them for is a multiple format. And that means you can put in that I accept in a field either a 5-digit number or a 10-digit number. And you divide the different specifications with this pipe sign. It's not a capital L, it's a pipe. It's called a pipe. So whenever you use multiple formats, you need to divide everything with this pipe operator. I don't expect you to understand all these different formats, but they are good to know, and they can help you a lot to try and make the system actually capture what is on an invoice. And it's good if someone uses a font that where maybe this 0 looks very much like an O, and you need to be sure that it actually captures an O instead of a 0. That is where it's very useful. There's also some other features that if you want to take the optimize to a max, let's say this field that we have here, it's so close to the invoice number that we are simply not able to, we cannot capture anything on this one. It keeps getting in our way. What we also can do, besides making asterisks, as I showed you, we have a filter function in the upper left side. And if you click that one, you can see it gets marked. And then you have a drop-down list where you can go in and find the, for instance, the erase button. And then you can put it on top of this area here. And then Interpret can no longer see this information. So it's simply not able to select more than what is right here. It could also be that they put in invoice number / date. So that way you can remove whatever is wanted on an invoice. There's a lot of different filters where one of them is called lines. If they have a pre-printed layout where you always get the gross amount on top of a line, if for some reason they put it on here, if you use the line, it simply removes a horizontal line, and you can read information more easily. There's also an invert, where if they have a black thick line where they put in the values in white, it can sometimes be difficult for the system to read. So you can invert it so everything that is black is getting white and white is getting black. So suddenly you have, instead of a white text in a black thick box, you have a white background and a black text. So the filter is also a good thing to use if it's very difficult to read something on an invoice. You can also make it more clear, and you can make it more crisp with the fine graining. And the desparkle is if you have a lot of dots, if there's a lot of noise on the paper you receive, you can also use that. Any questions to this?
Maybe I have a question.
Okay.
Sometimes we have like to close the total amount and the currency. So if you erase with the filter on the left top side, it will be only like erase in that particular
Position.
yeah, in that position, and maybe it will be able, once we are selecting the currency, or it will be erased for the whole interpretation of that invoice or vendor.
So you're asking if the currency is too close to the amount, it gets in the way, so to say. Yeah. What you it is correct that it does. Let's say they didn't put in a space anywhere on this one. So what you could do with the erase tool here is to simply, you can simply go in and say, I do expect the currency to be somewhere here, depending on how many lines they are putting in. But you are allowed to do it like this and select the amount. And then you just have to manually type in the currency. So you just go in, select the currency.
Interpretation.
Yeah, with the interpretation, yes.
Okay, perfect.
So that's possible. But it is taking it to the max. It shouldn't be necessary, but yeah, sometimes we do see they're putting the information too close. It could also be that the amount is too close to maybe a thick line, horizontal line, and it treats it as a digit one. I've also seen that sometimes. Then you can also erase this line if it's too close to.
Yeah, thank you, Peter.
Is there something else? Did I forget to tell you something? Maybe one more. Yeah, one thing. Now it sounds like you should go in and just optimize everything. That is definitely not the case. Taking optimization to the limit is also it's too much. You need, of course, to select your battles. Invoice definition gets created all the time. So if you are having too much of a problem with an invoice definition, especially now that we do the upgrade, don't waste too much time trying to make it work. It's all right just to delete it and wait for the definition to be recreated again. If you already have a definition, an invoice in your system where it didn't find anything, and you delete it, you don't delete the invoice. You only delete the definition, and it warns you that all the attached invoices will be reinterpreted. So they will disappear for a short while if you delete the definition, and then they reappear with the new one. So don't be afraid to delete definitions if they are causing you too much problem. And now that we do the upgrade, we also upgrade what we call the engine behind the interpret engine. And they put in some new functionality. They maybe convert images a bit differently and stuff like that. So it could be some of the definition that might have worked in before doesn't work that much that good anymore. It's not a major step that you do now, so we shouldn't see too many of these issues at all. So and also, as I showed you before with the statistics, you can go in, select your own company codes, have a look at your incorrect ident, make sure that you get rid of those that are too high, and also have a look at your total column. Those you use the most, go in and see if you can maybe even auto-approve them. If you're able to select your top 20%, then you have 80% of your invoice flow running directly through the system without going through Verify. So it's a one-time investment that you do. So I think you should pay more attention to the invoice optimization. And if you don't have further questions, I actually think I'm at the end, unless I have forgotten something, Jesper. I don't know if you recall.
No.
You do get a copy of this PowerPoint that I've used. There are some useful information and also a lot of text that I didn't want to read, but there's a lot of other stuff, and you can see all the different things that I have. And the recording will be located somewhere at your network. So you can always go back and see it again. And if you have some questions for me afterward also, you are more than welcome just to contact me or Jesper. Then he will get in touch with me.
Yes. Any questions for now?
No, I believe that everything is good. Thank you,
Yes,
Jesper.
thank you very
Peter.
much. Thank you, Peter and
you.
Jesper.
You are more than welcome.
Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
You
Have a
too.
great day. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.